Perfect. So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining in. Welcome to this session. We're going to be talking about paid social, Facebook ads, but broader paid social and the paid social environment through Q4 this year. As everyone probably on this webinar will know, things have changed fairly dramatically in the world of paid social this year. So I think Q4 this year is going to be really interesting, and hopefully we can give you some really good insights into what we see working well, and also what to avoid. So just kind of as an overview, the session is going to be a little bit different to previous webinars that we've run. So usually we'll run through a presentation and then have QA at the end, but this time we're going to focus the entire thing on QA with our expert panel. So that means there's plenty of opportunity to answer any questions. So if you have them, like, we genuinely would love to hear from you. So please do ask them. There's a couple of ways you can do that. Drop your questions into the chat. We'll see them come up there and we'll make sure they're covered. Or there is also the Zoom webinar QA function that you should also be able to ask questions with as well. So once again, like, please do ask questions. The more you ask, I think the better this will be for everyone. So genuinely would love to hear from you. So without further ado, like, the panel that we have today, we've got Dan, who is our Senior Account Manager from Overdrive Digital. We've got Kat from Overdrive Digital, and special guest from AO.com, Simon Tornea.
Yeah,
Did I get that right?
Not bad, yeah.
Perfect.
I've been called worse, but yeah, Simon Tournier.
Tournier. Perfect. All right, well, look, thanks everyone for joining. Before we get started, do you guys want to do like a little bit of an intro? Like, we'll go around in a circle, introduce who you are. Kind of short, brief overview would be amazing.
Cool. Yeah, so as John mentioned, I'm Dan. I'm the Senior Account Manager at Overdrive Digital. So I kind of work closely with both the PPC and the paid social teams. So kind of get a good insight into everything that's going on in the world of paid media. Joined the team 2.5 years ago now, which has flown by. I've been working in paid social for over 5 years now. So there used to be an in-house background, moved to agency side 2.5 years ago, and haven't stopped loving it ever since. So yeah, that is me.
Excellent. And Kat, you've got a pretty interesting background in events and joined the world of paid social about a year ago now. So yeah, bit of an intro from you.
Yeah, I joined Overdrive kind of the start of December last year, so I'm nearly coming up to my 1 year, which is really exciting. But before that, I was in the world of events, again, agency side. So we were doing touring structures for motor racing clients for different events, so that was really exciting, but wanted to change roles. So yeah, I've been working with John and the team since December, and I'm a social executive, so I'm more in the day-to-day running of the accounts for multiple different clients at the moment. So yeah, kind of getting the hang of things still, but I think I'm getting there.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
100%.
absolutely. And what a year to get into the world of paid social.
Yeah, it's been entertaining.
And Simon.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I'm Simon, Senior Digital Media Manager for AO.com. So primarily looking after all things paid social, digital display and digital video. Been there for 2.5 years. Previous to that, I was with a beauty retail company doing similar role. And then prior to that, I was agency side, specifying on paid social. So I've been doing paid social since 2012. And I can actually remember all the way back when the best ad placement was the logout screen of Facebook on a desktop. That was the most efficient ad. So yeah, I feel like I've been doing it for a while, but it's a great thing to do. It's as we'll discuss today, it's changing all the time, and yeah, just great thing to be involved in.
Perfect. Yeah, how it has changed in such a
Yes.
relatively short amount of time. That's amazing, isn't it, to think of that? So I guess to get started, how have you guys seen it changing this year? Because I think 2021 has probably seen one of the biggest shifts in terms of how the platform works in a concentrated amount of time that I think I can remember. But how have you guys seen it? So maybe Simon, you kick off from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I was thinking about this question before, and I reckon I can kind of essentially summarize it into kind of three buckets and three kind of main schools of thought. So the first one for me is the audience and the users of social media. I reckon obviously everything that happened in 2020 triggered a huge surge. People just used social media a lot more because they could. And I don't actually think that trend has changed much through 2021. So the audience and the usage is still way up compared to where it's been. But what's come with that is a kind of expectation now from the audience. They're expecting personalized content all the time. They're expecting to see things that are relevant to them, and they're expecting to be entertained. And I appreciate I've used the word expecting a lot there, because that's what our audiences do. They are incredibly high demanding people with huge expectations. So yeah, definitely the audience and how they're using social media, I think is a big shift for us. The advertisers, so I obviously include myself in this, but there are more of them and they're all getting really good. I can think back to years gone by, you could kind of rely, not necessarily on your direct competition, but your broader strokes, advertisers, maybe not doing the best practice, maybe not using things the way that they should be used. And it always felt like you had a bit of an advantage when you were doing things the right way. But it feels like a lot of advertisers now are really starting to catch up, and they're just getting better, which is great because it does just push you, it pushes us to be better as well. So no one's getting complacent. And then the final bit, which I suppose is the real kind of technical and under the hood type stuff, is kind of like the mechanics of paid social. So there are more creative opportunities than there's ever been before. There are more ad types and ad placements than there's ever been before. And then the one, which is probably, I don't mean it to sound like a negative, but I suppose it is a bit negative, is maybe there's now a bit more lack of clarity and transparency, especially with things regarding the attribution and things like that. So those three are kind of as a kickoff, I guess, where I see the main themes and the main changes coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the point about there's more creative opportunities, and I think creative opportunities across the spectrum. So, yes, creative and ad formats, but also like creative opportunities to advertise within the platform too. Yeah. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely think on the point around creative and things, I think where you'll see, like Simon was saying, where there's a lot of good advertisers now and there's a lot of good brands putting out really good content and things, is especially last year in the world of e-commerce, people's growth accelerated past maybe 5-year plans. But with that came a bit of complacency in terms of anything you put live potentially worked, because there was just a lot of people with in-market demand. They had a bit of spare money, so they were tempted to try new hobbies and try new things or make that bigger ticket purchase they hadn't done previously. Whereas I think where the sort of people that can get their content and creative strategy right versus now is this year, not everything does work creative-wise anymore. And I think a lot of us, even ourselves, are learning that maybe what was working creative-wise last year was actually more of a circumstance than actually this was the content piece that we should focus on, and we've had to pick and things like that. So I think it's kind of like looking back even further, which is even the bigger challenges, because I think quite a lot of people have blinkered from the last 18 months. And it's how you address those challenges, and like we'll go into how we've all worked through that and I've seen what works. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And yeah, just in general, there's so many changes this year. I can't even count on my hands the amount of things that are either changing or coming up, like the dreaded iOS stuff that everyone talks about. Google's pushing more automation on everyone around and everything like that. Attribution updates, and obviously how you attribute across all these multiple channels now, and diversifying the mix. And the supply chain issues, which I'm sure Simon will go into, working at AO.com. The world's opening up again, so there's external factors you can't control and factors you can control. There's so much that's just changed, and it's felt like one thing after another this year, but it's kept everyone on their toes, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions that we had in advance was, how has IDFA impacted spend on Facebook? So how has the changes on iOS impacted spend, I guess, across the accounts that we manage, guys, but also, yep, Simon's side. So maybe, I don't know, Kat, if you want to kick off with that.
I think iOS 14, it came out this spring. But it has changed so much. So where once your retargeting audiences could have been your best top performing ones, it's likely now that top funnel might be the top performing ones. I've seen a couple of clients recently where the top funnel's doing really well, but retargeting is really underperforming. And it's because we just don't have that data anymore. And I think we've got into a habit of having all this data, all this information that we can use with our advertising. And we need to go back to the days where we didn't have that information. And I think that's kind of, it's really difficult to like change your mind into thinking that you don't have that information anymore, because it's still, the platform looks exactly the same. It doesn't seem like you don't have the information, but it just looks like you're performing really badly. If you then look into things on your back end, so into your GA accounts, you're actually doing just as well as you were. It just doesn't look like you're doing as well as you were in platform. So it's been really difficult to kind of try and translate that into how we discuss things with clients, like how we see Facebook is performing. It's kind of changing the way we look at performance and kind of what we're looking at. So if the client was looking for a ROAS of 5 in January this year, it's likely you're not going to get that this next few months because of the iOS 14 update. So you need to lower the expectations. But if you look in the back end, you're just doing as well as before. It just doesn't look like that at the moment. So it's a really difficult topic because there's no one really knows the exact impacts. It's kind of client to client at the moment, what's happening there.
Yeah, and I think that point on measuring, like we're talking about Q4 this year, actually like year on year or getting a sense of how well you're doing is a little bit tricky because the view on performance has changed so massively this year. Also, last year was such a different year anyway because of global pandemic. So it's actually quite hard to gauge kind of performance. So we definitely want to have a talk about that. If anyone's got any questions on that specifically, please do let us know, because I think it's such a big part of it this year is, how do you know if you're doing well or not? It is a really kind of big, important part. So any questions on that, drop them in. Please do let us know. In terms of kind of planning for this Q4, like what are the steps that people should be going through right now? What are you seeing working right now? What do you think is going to work through Q4? Like any insight into those things would be great. Who wants to kick that one off? I mean, that's like massive.
Yeah, I don't mind sort of picking that one up to start with. So I think for us, in terms of, like I say, planning for the Q4, the first thing that we've been doing is we've been planning for Q4. Technically, if you trace it back, since the end of Q4 last year, the end of Q4 last year, the first thing that we did was a great big retro on Q4 2020. So we went through the quarter, broken down with the various campaigns, the various pieces of activity that we did a great kind of RAG system, what worked, what didn't work, what did we test, what were the results of the test. And we really did invest quite a bit of time in making sure that we're going to learn from everything that we've just done. As Dan mentioned earlier, kind of 2020 was such a difficult one because it felt like almost everything worked, and you chuck peak into that situation as well. Again, it felt like that was kind of the situation. So we really wanted to make sure that we took some learnings ahead going into this year. So we were kind of started that planning process really early. The other thing that we did quite early on, and I suppose it's a good point in terms of how measurement sort of is going to work for us, particularly year-on-year measurement, is we started thinking of what KPIs, what metrics do we want to see shifts and improvements in. Kind of forget last year, like let's put a pin in that for now, but let's just clean slate Q4 this year. What do we really want to improve on, and what metrics do we want to focus on? And let's plan for that, because then you can kind of not worry too much about year-on-year growth or year-on-year changes, but you've got your plan. You can say, right, how are we to plan? Are we where we should, want to be, or do we need to start making some changes? Are we missing certain metrics by loads, or are we almost there, or are we in fact smashing it? So we've kind of already got our certain KPIs, metrics, things lined up. Those things are not going to be sort of like any great surprises to anyone. They're pretty typical sales funnel type metrics. They're pretty typical for your big broad audiences right through to specific kind of retargeting audiences to get those, for us obviously at AO, those sales, those conversions over the line. So there's nothing really in there that's, you know, massively shocking or a bit out of the box in there. And then the last bit that we did was, once we did that, we kind of then put in place plans B and C. You know, we're already thinking, right, you know, what's our contingency? How are we going to react to certain things? So a great one for Q4, particularly as we move now into, you know, we're getting closer to November, and there's a big sale event usually happens every November.
What one is that?
And so we've kind of got everything in place to say, right, well, okay, if we need to change certain ad creatives because of, you know, a deal changes last minute, which can happen obviously during a Black Friday sales event, we're kind of prepared for that. We've got steps in place. If there's certain creative tests that we're doing, we've got things in place to change those creatives really quickly. So we kind of feel like we're prepared as much as we can be. And then usually it's a great big thing I wrote on the whiteboard in our digital media section in the office. Q4, the saying is hope for the best and prepare for the worst. And that's pretty much what we're going for, I think.
Yeah. Does everyone think like a quite an agile approach is important this year? Because, you know, being able to react to changes, and, you know, there's so much going on that, you know, you've got your plan, you've got your KPIs, you know what you think you're going to achieve, and you know how to look at it, but having that agile approach more so than probably other years is more important. True or false?
True.
And
I think it's being really fluid. Like I think we were talking about this earlier. If you've got, for example, you know, your mix is Google Ads, Pinterest, Facebook, whatever your mix is, some people have really rigid budgets. And I think more than anything this year is go where you're getting the return. And the clients we have that are very fluid in those conversations and agile and kind of get those sort of things and have their, like Simon was saying, their plan A, B, and C, like if we hit X, can we scale sort of things. The people we speak with that have that in place, they're normally the winners in this period. It's when you haven't really thought out long term or different scenarios and can't be agile because you don't have the backups of creative, you know, a trigger point where you could potentially scale spend, or a conversation of, oh, we're going to struggle to fulfill all these orders. We need to actually pull back if it's the best scenario where it goes really well. It's like, if there's nothing in place to plan and be agile like that, it's where it normally falls down in Q4. It sounds really simple, but it's just like methodically planning everything. And I think the other thing for me is, especially with Facebook, some of the data's delayed now by 3 days. So it's kind of like, we'll probably go into this later, like around like just looking at your overall marketing cost input versus the revenue just in general. And like, does that look acceptable for the period? And if it does, is that like a confidence point for you to push or like know what's working? Because you can't really afford to wait 3 days for some ghost data to come back into the platform. You need to know there and then. So getting all your UTM parameters right from a last click basis just to see, and the indicators there is important as well. So it's just all the mechanics need to be right and working together, I think, this year more than ever. Long answer to a short question.
It was a true or false question. So a couple of questions in for you, Simon. So one of the things, and I know, Kat, you've been doing quite a lot on this as well, so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts too. One of the questions here is, I've been noticing more brands, both big and small, using like real genuine content in their ads, and it's something that catches their eye. Like, do you think that's a trend that all brands should be considering? Is it something that you're doing? How do you see that fitting into the mix? It's a great question, because I think
definitely Great question there. So what I would say is, and it probably ties a little bit into what Dan was saying about the fluidity and the agility approach. And thinking of horses for courses, in a sense, I think there is 100%, yes, use sort of that kind of real content in adverts. As we mentioned, social media usage is still way up. People are used to seeing the content that is relevant to them, and that's what they're responding to, and that's not what they're expecting to see. And there's no reason why ads shouldn't be any different. One of the really interesting pieces of work that I know Facebook have done, now Facebook surveys I'll always take with a pinch of salt, but I have seen some other surveys that have been done as well, and that is that people genuinely want personalized advertising. You know, they don't want the scattergun approach, you know. And I know we've obviously talked about some iOS elements and some targeting options no longer available, etc. But people do want their ads that are relevant to them. And that's where I think this type of content within the advert can really sort of strive. So for us at AO, some of our elements will be, depending on the targeting that we're doing, but we might be going for really just kind of like inspirational type things. You know, some of the products that we sell at AO, some of the white good products like your fridge, freezers and washing machines, for you know, they are quite functional purchases. I don't think anybody's ever impulse bought a washing machine. But when you're looking at a washing machine, it's a big purchase, it's a big consideration, and people will think about how that looks and feels within their home. So let's show them how it looks and feels within a home. And that can have a big impact. The same with maybe, you know, for us again, smaller appliances, things like that are really sort of helpful and beneficial. So yeah, definitely would encourage that where possible. Again, appreciate that not every opportunity will allow it, and like I said, it's just making the most out of it when you get that chance.
Yep, that makes sense. And Kat, a bit of a question off the back of that, in terms of kind of contextual content or like user generated content within ads, do you think that's more suited to certain placements? Like I know just from my experience of using Instagram, going through stories and you see like a really slick ad, sometimes that's a bit of a jarring experience because it jumps out a bit too much. I don't know whether that's just me or not. But do you think it's more suited towards certain placements, or is across the board, or what's your thought there?
Definitely certain placements will work better with kind of that user generated content, less curated content. So the obvious places are places like TikTok, where people go there for the content rather than creators. They don't go there for a specific creator, they go there for the content. So being able to jump on that type of trend quickly is super important for that TikTok placement. But different social media platforms, so let's take LinkedIn, it's unlikely you want something not curated on LinkedIn, because that is a platform where you expect things to be quite well done and quite rehearsed and things like that. But there's definitely different platforms that work for different things. So for user generated content, I definitely go for TikTok, Instagram Reels, Instagram Stories. The other thing to kind of think about is the audience itself. So potentially a younger audience would prefer to see that more personable content, whereas an older audience still expects to see that kind of ad type like images that you see more curated. So I think it really depends on what you're selling and where you're selling it to and who you're selling it to. Figuring those three things out is probably going to be the best thing for you. And also you need to think that don't be on every platform. You can't be on every platform because your audience isn't likely to be on every platform. So yeah, I think user generated content next year will be a huge thing as well. I think it's becoming more and more, people expect to see user generated content. I saw a really great ad the other day, which was kind of the Christmas beauty calendars that you have, and it looked like just a normal person had made it, and they were showing you what was in it. And I didn't realize it was an ad until I'd clicked on it. I'd gone through just the site, like I'd viewed the content, and then I realized, like,
until you didn't realize until you bought it.
And then I bought it. I think for me personally, I do like that type of content, but then certain brands like Chanel, you wouldn't really expect to see content like that. You'd expect to see the curated content that you put a lot of money into it. It's very well done, very high, kind of high fashion type stuff. But yeah, I think it definitely depends on who you're showing it to as well. It's very important.
Yeah, perfect. Well, look, great question, Emily. So thank you very much for that. Another question here around supply chains and supply shortages. So that's adding another dynamic to Q4 this year. Simon, how are you guys planning for that? Because it's a bit of an unknown how, like, what cutoff dates are going to look like. Is it going to be fine? Is it not going to be fine?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to.
How are your stress levels?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I really want to answer the question, but I don't want to wriggle out of it either. So I think because what we've got at AO is, there's an entire buying team and an entire trading team and an entire logistics business that kind of look after all of that. So I don't want to just kind of deflect from it. I think what I would say is, I think the two key things for us at AO is communication around the business, absolutely vital, key, and the speed of that communication. Like us in marketing, and marketing as a whole, not just me in the digital media, but the paid search, the PLA team, the Google teams, the affiliates teams, the CR, every part of marketing, we rely on that information being as up to date as possible and getting to us as quickly as possible, because we're going to make decisions off the back of that. So that's really important and really key. And then the second bit, and it really just kind of echoes something that Dan mentioned earlier, is being able to be agile and fluid, being able to pivot and move our attentions and our spend into areas that warrant it, essentially, or out of areas where we really shouldn't be pushing it. So I know supply, all those things are very well documented for every retailer at the moment, and I know they're already in the mainstream news talking about the Christmas shopping elements as we approach them even further. And I think I saw about toys. If you want to get toys for Christmas, you're gonna have to buy them now, and those kind of things. So I think that the theme is going to be pretty similar for most. I think for us, it's just staying as up to date as we can and being prepared to pivot when we need to.
Yeah. And I actually think on that, what's interesting, it's not like a supply, it's to do with supply issue, but like I was reading, I think some of the British Board of Consumers and things, it was they got information where they think a lot of people are going to pull their Christmas purchases forward during the Black Friday period, so it's a bit of a potential double whammy. I know most sites are fine these days and they don't go down for a surge of traffic, but some of the smaller businesses do. If they're not prepared for that. It's like, if there is that bigger influx, are you prepared for that? And the communication, like Simon just said, of like the site's down. If no one if no one in the marketing team is aware of that for an hour or two, and you're spending thousands and thousands in your paid ads, you just wasted a key chunk of your spend for that period. So it's that element as well. It will be a small minority that will probably affect, but it's having those internal processes alongside that as well, which I think is going to be key.
Definitely. Yeah. I think it's agility, isn't it? And plan Bs and plan Cs and, having all of that in your back pocket ready to go. But no, amazing, brilliant question there. Thank you, Colin. To everyone else, we're getting some great questions in. If you've got any, please do drop them in the QA. We'll get to as many as we possibly can, and love hearing from you. So if there's anything you want us to cover, please just drop that in, and it makes the whole conversation and session so much better. So what else is there for this Q4 that's different to last Q4, right? And let's talk about other platforms for a second, right? So obviously, when we talk about paid social, typically Facebook gets the lion's share of the conversation. What about diversification and experimenting on other platforms? So a lot of people are struggling a little bit on Facebook ads at the moment. It's a little bit tough. It's changed a lot. I'm sure that will settle. The performance is definitely still there. But I think more so than ever, diversification is really important. So what's everyone's feelings on different platforms? Is there anything that's as good? What's the plan B on that side of things? Big question again, obviously.
I think sorry, Dan.
You go, Kat.
No, I was just going to say that one of our clients is had the same kind of thought, especially with Facebook going down beginning of last week. They wanted kind of the ability to change with different platforms, and if something were to happen to one, at least you've got other platforms to advertise on. So we're trying some advertising on Quora and Reddit. Yep. Which I know there's a lot of talk about Reddit at the moment potentially being like the next big platform for advertising. They're very different to your kind of Instagram and your Facebook and Google Ads. That it's not, the key metrics for these is not typically conversions. It's more building an audience around your brand. So it's traffic, it's bringing people to site, it's letting people know about your brand awareness and reach. It's kind of increasing that pool of people going to your website, which will then in turn increase the Facebook retargeting audiences that you have. So we're trying that at the moment as we go into Q4. But it's in terms of diversifying across platforms, not every platform is going to be used for like conversions, especially if you're an e-commerce brand. Yep. So you need to think about what's the platform used for, and how can you use it for your brand?
Yep. What about you, Simon? Oh, sorry, Dan.
No, I was going to say
we've done it. We've someone's spoken over someone. Yeah. Go on.
No, so I was going to say, like, a good example of Kat was to say was like around Pinterest. Like, that's such a consideration phase. A lot of people, like, I don't know, if you're like thinking about moving house, for example, you've probably got your bathroom, your living room, your kitchen, like all these different boards, and you're probably pinning a lot of these items for quite a considerable amount of time.
Yep.
And on these attribution windows and things that we've already spoke about, that purchase may not be tangibly attributed back to the platform, but it will have an impact. But it's like knowing what your goal is for being on that platform is key. Don't just go on it because it's a separate channel to try. It's like, why am I on Pinterest? Like, is it to build brand awareness, that increase that consideration phase in that market? Otherwise, if you're just going there thinking of the same goals on other channels, you're probably not going to see the results you want. I don't know, like, what channels you're using, Simon, from an AO perspective, and what your goals are.
No, I mean, I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I think it's really important to understand what it is you're trying to get out of that platform. Like you said, not every platform is going to deliver you the same sales and revenue and maybe ROAS numbers, or lead gen and CPA numbers and those kind of things that you're going to work on. So I think it's really important to know what it is that you're trying to get out of that platform and how it's going to help you get to the end goal. So again, for AO, we are pretty much on kind of all of the, I suppose, the major social media sort of platforms, and each one of them is doing a slightly different job. Now, typically, we don't really think of the stereotypical sales funnel, through sort of like broad consideration, conversion, retail, that kind of thing, just because I think everyone in digital marketing appreciates no one's sat there scrolling through Pinterest thinking, oh, there's an advert, I must be in the consideration audience because they're advertising me this. And, people don't think that. Like, they will drop and change and be all over the place in that funnel. But that being said, it is actually, I suppose, from a management point of view and our point of view of, us on the call who are actually doing these campaigns, it does allow you to kind of label them and categorize them and have those objectives. So you're right, if you're after that kind of consideration and getting the kind of the gray matter kicking in and of your audience and thinking about you, then platforms like Pinterest are a great job of being that inspirational and aspirational surrounding. Platforms like, I know it's an interesting one, but platforms like Snapchat are actually really good. So when I talk Snapchat, I know a lot of people instantly think, oh, it's just a load of kids on Snapchat. And you think, they were kids 6-7 years ago, but they're still using Snapchat. And now they're actually early 20s. They're actually in that audience frame now. And one of the most interesting things that happened with Snapchat again, 6-7 years ago, you had all these 13, 14, 15-year-olds joining it. Well, the natural progression that happens after that is their parents join the platform, because that's what parents do. So now not only do you have those young adults, you've got their parents still using the platforms as well. So you've got a huge audience there that is still available. And then TikTok is still the interesting one. It's, I think, the most downloaded app of all time in a 12-month period. So, and the usage, everyone's very well aware of it. Probably everyone on, watching us now, and I know us have talked about TikTok, and I'm certainly losing anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of my day every day on TikTok.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting platform, but you're right. You have to think, what am I trying to get out of it? How is this going to help me with my end goal and my end objective? And then you can use it in the best way possible as well. And then that's probably the key bit that I think with those other platforms. I think as well, I mean, there's debate, I guess, whether you'd count it as a social media platform, but I still think YouTube plays a big part. Some of the numbers I've seen regarding YouTube usage on TVs now, so on connected TVs and smart TVs, because of through 2020, people are watching YouTube the way they watch TV now. And you think you add in the targeting options that Google gives you, you add in the channel placements and the relevancy of where you can show your adverts, you chuck in, some nice sort of digital attribution elements and data-driven modeling in there as well. And you start thinking, why on earth am I doing TV advertising at all?
Yeah, it's, I think I still think it's a really untapped advertising platform in terms of the attention it gets in proportion to everything else. That is so powerful and so exciting in terms of what you can do with it. So I definitely think that's another great option. But I guess, are we all relatively in agreement that paid social wise, Facebook and Instagram are still getting the lion's share of the budget, still getting the lion's share of the attention and the effort this Q4, despite all the changes? That's where the potential, the biggest potential and quicker wins lie this year. Is that the general theme?
I would say so. I'd say as long as you've got your Facebook and Instagram house in order, everything else is the lovely little extension you're going to put on your house. But your main bulk of it, I think, will always be Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. And I think people rightly have questions. They've had some horror stories, which I think have been exaggerated a bit. But we've seen still strong performance in periods and also dips. And I think it's easy to forget about seasonality as well. And it's kind of why is this not converting every week the same way? And it's not how we used to look at things. Last year did blinker, I think, quite a lot of people. But we ran one client an end of season sale, but it'll probably end up being quite similar in terms of the stock levels, what's on offer, to what they'll probably have around Black Friday. And it worked really well. So it's kind of it's now we've seen a fallow period after it, but it's kind of there was this, so don't panic. You've got a plan, stick, what you're offering is, stick to it. Don't think, oh, do I need to go up another 10% on the discount? Or not no knee-jerk reactions. Trust in what you've seen. I also can't imagine that there's going to be so much consumer demand during that period. It may end up helping a platform that is seeing less data going through it, which has always used that data to find the best people in that audience you're targeting. There's probably going to be a good period for that platform. And if you've got, like Simon said, if your house is in order on it and you've got a good structure, plan and everything, trust in it. Don't go spinning 1,000 plates on different channels if you've never tried them before, because you may end up chasing your tail and suffering from it. So I think confidence in your own decisions is probably a key thing in Q4 as well, and try not to listen to the noise from everyone else in the industry, because people like to you
look at certain people on Twitter or certain kind of sources of information, it sounds like everything's doom and gloom and it's all dead and it's, but it is absolutely not. And I think again that's a good piece of advice, is don't panic.
Yeah.
Your audience who are on Facebook in March pre-iOS are still on Facebook and Instagram now. It's just the mechanics have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
Another really good question has just come in. So from kind of almost like a beginner point of view, what's the best platform to analyze ad performance data and drill down into audience targeting? So we use a load of tools here. Simon, it'd be really interesting to know if you got any tools and tooling tech that you use on your side. But yeah, Dan or Kat, do you want to kick that one off? Because we use quite a few things.
So for, I guess, analysis, it's very difficult to view anything in Facebook and get an accurate representation. So we use a tool called Supermetrics, which essentially plugs into the API, pulls all the information out. You can manipulate it however you want. We put it into a Google Sheet. You can also hook it up to Google Data Studio if you need any dashboards and things. And we find that really useful in terms of going in with a question and pulling out the relevant information that we need. So as a beginner, I'd always recommend that. They have a free trial as well, so you can always, we don't get commission, by the way, when we're saying this, although I feel like we should. But yeah, it's great just to play around with it and kind of work out what your needs are from it.
But
in terms of like,
I do think it's such an important point in that you have to be able to extract data from the platform and see trends over time. Yeah, particularly at the moment. So I think, even though it's framed as a beginner question, I think it's just such a brilliant one and a brilliant point to raise.
Yeah, and you can automate everything. So you can kind of get your checks in every day, refreshes in the morning, you can kind of see where you're at, obviously, and things like that, which is really useful. In terms of audiences, I don't know, Kat, if you wanted to share what we're doing in terms of looking on various platforms and how we're finding new ideas at the moment.
Yeah, I think audiences is always a hard one. It's you kind of build that persona of what you think your audience is, and you most of the time you are right, but sometimes you're not. There's one of my colleagues, Ellie, wrote a great blog about using GA to find affinity categories. So if you want to go onto our website and read that.
Wonderful plug.
Wonderful
plug.
But it was really interesting to see that some clients, some of the audiences might be, you're trying to sell wool, and these audiences are interested in green living and 30-minute chefs and things like that. And building an audience from that has actually worked really well recently. In terms of other audiences, it's just, Facebook has so many different interests that you can try, and it's testing what you think could work, what you think might work, and then building them together. It's a very try and test platform. So we spent this entire year creating different testing strategies, and every couple of weeks we'll do a new test, we'll try something new, we'll try this, we'll try that. Recently, interest-based audiences have been working better than lookalikes. So as we're losing the data with iOS 14, again, talking about iOS 14, it's really important to work out what those interests are that your audiences have, and doing different variations of it at the moment. So yeah, I think audiences is a bit of a hard one.
Yeah, it is as much research as you can do, which is obviously very important. There is still a big element of experimentation and testing, and you don't know until you know. Yeah, I think. Simon, you're very popular. This may be a question, it may be a comment. Simon, you must be super busy. Any tips on how to stay on top of everything? Do you have a fantastic team too? Oh, careful, because that might have been put in by a team member.
Yeah, I know. That's well, no, I am lucky. I do have a very good team. So in my role and the way that AO is structured, I'm actually looking after all things digital media for our UK retail business and our Germany retail business. So I've actually got teams based in both countries that I'm kind of working with. And I would definitely say I'm spoiled. They're a great team. In terms of keeping on top of everything, it's really, there's probably two things I can think of that kind of do with it. One thing I think I've kind of already mentioned, and it really is just about trying to be planned, organized, and know what it is that you're trying to do. I think in the past, I have been guilty of kind of running campaigns and seeing what would happen. And then after the fact, looking for the success and saying, that's where I did really well. And, you know, kind of looking at it the wrong way around. So I think going into it with a clear goal and objective of what it is that you're trying to do. And the other piece that I would say, I'm a big fan of a cliche and a metaphor as well. So it was this thing that I read about ages ago, and we've always used it in AO, particularly in the digital media team. And it's this idea that elite level athletes, your Olympian 100-meter sprinters, train for 4 years for the Olympics to perform in that one race at their absolute best. And that will be them at their absolute best. In the special forces, they train to perform at their absolute worst. They train so that when they're out on a mission and they've not slept for 3 days and they've barely eaten and they're drinking rainwater and they're carrying 50 kilos in a rucksack, they can still perform and they're at their worst. And that's where we try to get to. We try to make sure that we can still perform at our absolute worst when we feel it. And it's just a bit of a cliche, a bit of a funny mindset to think of, but it's something that we kind of rely on and use and think of as well. So when you get those crunch times, when you get really busy, when you've got to be, you know, flexible and make a change, and suddenly your lovely, neat and tidy campaign structure with your lovely defined audiences and your super proud ad creatives have to completely go out the window and you've got to change it all again. You just roll with it and you take it on, I think.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, particularly when you're coming up to those busy periods or things are changing. It's like, that's what you need to be ready for. Like, yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of approaching our end time. If anyone's got any last minute questions to fire in, please do. What I guess, like, briefly, you guys, like, what would your one key, like, piece of advice for Q4 this year be? Kat, I'm going to put you on the spot.
I think from a practical standpoint, rules on your platforms are going to be your best friend over the next few months, but don't rely on them. Never trust a rule. Never ever trust a rule.
So you mean automated rules for
automated rules? Yeah. So if you have something going live at midnight, always make sure when you come online to check it, because sometimes it doesn't work. So,
yeah.
Practical advice.
Yeah, brilliant. Simon.
So I think for me, it's about speed and reaction and not being that kind of hesitant or scared to make that decision. If you're running campaigns and something looks like it might be working really well, don't be scared to go for it, I think is one for us. I've seen a lot of times when people are running a 2-week test and they won't do anything till the end of the 2 weeks, when really after 5 days I could have told you what's going to happen at the end of the 2 weeks, and you've missed out on maybe 9 or 10 days of great performance. So yeah, if it what do they say? If it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck. So if the test looks like it's going one way, don't be scared to commit to it.
Yep, brilliant. Dan.
I was kind of going on the same line, but no, I think it's like it is like it's like a don't panic situation. Trust in you spent your whole year building up to this point on your strategy. Stick with the broad theme of it, but don't be afraid to pivot. And I think it comes back to like having those creatives in the bank ready to be able to be agile. But don't worry about having too much like all these bells and whistles. Like it has to look great creative. Like we've seen simple stuff work on Black Friday because all people really care about is normally the discount.
Yeah.
But it's the creative leading up to that to get them hooked is the key thing. So I think it's like just don't panic, stick to what you know. And like Simon said, like if you see a winner, double down on it and go for it, because that period will be gone before you know it, and you don't want to look back on anything going, we should have spent more. Because if there is a supply issue in December, your budget you set might not then be able to be spent if you can't fulfill anything. So don't be afraid of the period. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you guys, Kat, Dan, Simon. Thanks so much for kind of coming on and imparting all your advice to everyone. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to pop round the recording of this in the next day or so. So you will get the recording. Come and kind of give us a follow, give us a shout out on LinkedIn. Let us know what you thought of this. Hopefully it was useful for everybody. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Stop.